In the basement archives of the defunct Whitmore County Hospital in rural Kentucky, a maintenance worker named Carl Hendricks was clearing out water-damaged files when he stumbled upon something that should have been destroyed decades ago. Tucked behind a collapsed filing cabinet, wrapped in oilcloth and tied with surgical wire, was a leather portfolio marked Confidential, Dr. Nathaniel Morse, 1963. Inside were photographs that made Carl drop the bundle and back away. Medical charts written in trembling handwriting, and x-rays showing something that defied every principle of human anatomy he thought he understood. The case files documented the birth of conjoined twins in the remote hills of eastern Kentucky, children born so unnaturally fused that 3 different physicians refused to treat them. But these weren't ordinary medical records. They were evidence of a cover-up that reached into the highest levels of the state medical board, involving a family whose bloodline had been producing anatomical impossibilities for over a century. Before we dive into this buried horror, subscribe and comment with your thoughts on medical cover-ups. These suppressed stories need witnesses to survive. The Halbrook name first appeared in Whitmore County records in 1847, when Jeremiah Halbrook purchased 340 acres of limestone ridgeland for a price so low that neighboring farmers whispered about curses and tainted soil. The land deed, preserved in the county courthouse, noted unusual geological formations, caves that seemed to breathe, springs that ran red during certain seasons, and soil that grew nothing but pale, twisted vegetation. Jeremiah's wife, Constance, bore him 7 children over the next decade. But the birth records tell a story that the local midwives tried desperately to forget. According to the private journal of Martha Keene, the region's most experienced birthing woman, every Halbrook child arrived touched by something unholy. The first 3 were born with extra limbs that had to be removed in secret. The 4th and 5th shared organs that should have been separate. The 6th was born with 2 faces, though only one drew breath. Martha's journal, discovered in her family's attic in 1982, contained detailed sketches of the Halbrook births. Her handwriting grew increasingly erratic with each entry. The mother screams not from pain, but from seeing what emerges. I have delivered monsters before, but never such purposeful wrongness. It is as if something guides their formation in the womb. By 1859, word of the Halbrook abnormalities had reached the circuit preacher, Reverend Augustus Mills. His correspondence with the Methodist diocese, recently uncovered in their Nashville archives, revealed his growing concern about what he termed a biological blasphemy taking root in God's creation. But when Reverend Mills attempted to perform an exorcism on the pregnant Constance Halbrook, he was found 3 days later at the bottom of a limestone sinkhole, his neck broken in 3 places. The coroner's report, signed by Dr. Elias Thornton, noted accidental death by misadventure. But Dr. Thornton's private notes, hidden in a false bottom of his medical bag and found by his great-grandson in 1945, told a different story. The woman's belly moved independent of her breathing. When I pressed my stethoscope to her womb, I heard not 1 heartbeat, not 2, but a rhythm like nothing in medical literature. Reverend Mills was right to fear what grows in that house. The Halbrook bloodline expanded through the late 1800s, but their marriages followed patterns that violated both law and nature. Census records from 1870 through 1890 reveal a family tree that folded in on itself like origami made of flesh. Brothers married sisters, cousins wed before reaching legal age. Most disturbing of all, the 1885 census listed Jeremiah's son Matthias as being married to 3 women simultaneously: his own sister Rebecca, his first cousin Ruth, and a woman identified only as Monsieur Halbrook, relation unknown. The children born from these unions defied classification. Dr. Harrison Blackwood, who served as Whitmore County's physician from 1892 to 1904, kept meticulous records of the Halbrook births in a locked ledger. His entries, preserved in the Kentucky Medical Society archives, document a progression of anatomical impossibilities. 1893, twin girls born to Rebecca Halbrook, age 16, and Matthias Halbrook, age 19. Subjects share singular heart, positioned externally between rib cages. Survival unlikely. Update: both deceased within 72 hours. 94. Male infant born to Ruth Halbrook, age 17, and Matthias Halbrook. Subject possesses 4 arms, arranged in opposing pairs. Arms appear functional but serve no evolutionary purpose. Update: parents refused medical intervention. Child's fate unknown. 96. Triplets born to Monsieur Halbrook and Matthias Halbrook. All 3 subjects connected by shared spinal column, forming triangle configuration. Mobility impossible. All subjects display independent consciousness. Update: parents removed subjects from medical care against strong advisement. Dr. Blackwood's final entry regarding the Halbrooks was written in 1904, just weeks before his mysterious disappearance. I can no longer document what emerges from that accursed bloodline. What I witnessed during the latest birth violates not only medical understanding, but the very laws of physical reality. I am submitting my resignation and leaving Whitmore County immediately. Some knowledge is too dangerous for human minds to contain, but Dr. Blackwood never made it out of Kentucky. His horse was found wandering the mountain roads 3 days later, its saddlebags containing his medical instruments arranged in ritualistic patterns he would never have created. His body was discovered 6 months later in one of the Halbrook caves, positioned as if he had crawled there willingly and simply chosen to die. The Halbrook family retreated deeper into the Kentucky mountains as the 20th century progressed, building a compound in the remote Sourwood Hollow where no roads led and no government officials dared venture. For nearly 60 years, the outside world heard nothing from the bloodline that had produced such anatomical abominations. Then, in the summer of 1963, everything changed. A violent thunderstorm washed out the mountain roads and trapped Sarah Halbrook, great-great-granddaughter of the original Jeremiah, in labor with no way to reach her usual network of family midwives. Desperate and hemorrhaging, her husband Caleb loaded her into their rusted Ford pickup and made the treacherous journey to Whitmore County Hospital. Dr. Nathaniel Morse was working the night shift when the Halbrooks arrived. His initial case notes, written in steady medical script, document what he expected to be a routine delivery. Patient approximately 20 years of age, unmarried but accompanied by male relative claiming to be husband. Patient appears malnourished and displays several minor physical abnormalities. Elongated fingers, slightly protruding brow ridge, unusually pale skin that seems almost translucent. Labor progressing normally. But as the delivery progressed, Dr. Morse's handwriting began to deteriorate. His notes became increasingly frantic. Complications arising. Ultrasound equipment malfunctioning, displaying impossible readings. Patient's vitals fluctuating in patterns inconsistent with normal labor. Calling for backup immediately. When the twins finally emerged, 3 nurses fled the delivery room. The 4th, a veteran named Eleanor Cassidy, fainted and had to be revived with smelling salts. Only Dr. Morse remained, staring at what lay before him on the delivery table. The Halbrook twins were born fused not at the torso or head, as medical literature documented in known cases of conjoined twins, but in a configuration that defied anatomical possibility. They were connected by what appeared to be a third body, a perfectly formed but lifeless infant positioned between them, serving as a bridge of flesh and bone. This central figure had no independent nervous system, no heartbeat, no brain activity, yet its organs functioned in perfect harmony with both living twins. Dr. Morse's photographs, included in the hidden case files, show the impossible truth. 2 healthy, conscious infants connected by a third that existed in a state between life and death. The central child's eyes were open, but saw nothing. Its mouth moved, but made no sound. Its hands grasped reflexively at the air, but responded to no stimuli. Within hours of the birth, Dr. Morse had contacted the Kentucky State Medical Board, the University of Louisville Medical School, and 3 separate religious authorities. The response was swift and coordinated. The Halbrook twins were classified as a medical anomaly requiring specialized study and immediately transferred to a research facility in Louisville under conditions of absolute secrecy. But the cover-up began to unravel when Dr. Morse's assistant, a young medical student named James Whitfield, made unauthorized copies of the case files. His letter to his mentor at Johns Hopkins University, preserved in the university's medical correspondence archives, revealed the true scope of what had been hidden. "Professor Manning, I write to you in violation of my oath of confidentiality because what I have witnessed transcends medical protocol. The Halbrook infants are not merely conjoined. They represent an evolutionary impossibility that challenges our understanding of human biology. The central figure connecting them appears to serve as a biological relay station, processing sensory information and emotional responses for both conscious twins. When one child experiences pain, the other responds through the intermediary body. When one sleeps, the central figure's brain activity increases as if it were processing the dreams of both." Dr. Whitfield's letter continued with increasingly disturbing observations. Most troubling is the central infant's apparent awareness. Though it displays no independent consciousness, medical monitoring reveals that it responds to stimuli neither twin should be able to perceive. It reacts to conversations held in adjacent rooms. Its heart rate increases when staff members discuss potential separation procedures. Yesterday, when Dr. Morse mentioned the possibility of surgical intervention, the central figure opened its mouth and expelled what appeared to be human hair. Hair that genetic testing revealed belonged to family members who died decades before these children were born. The response from Johns Hopkins came within days. Dr. Whitfield was to destroy all copies of his documentation and never speak of the case again. The letter, signed by the medical school's dean, carried an implicit threat. "Some discoveries are too dangerous for public knowledge. Your career depends on your discretion." But Dr. Whitfield's conscience wouldn't allow him to remain silent. He began secretly documenting the twins' development, noting changes that grew more disturbing each day. The central connecting figure was aging at an accelerated rate, while the two conscious twins remained perfectly healthy. By the third week, the intermediary infant appeared decades older than its siblings, its skin wrinkled and grey, its hair white and brittle. More horrifying still, the central figure had begun to speak, not with its own voice, but channeling words in the distinct dialects and speech patterns of dead Halbrook family members. Dr. Whitfield's hidden recordings, stored on magnetic tape in a safety deposit box he never claimed, captured conversations between the twins that involved not two voices, but dozens. The truth about the Halbrook bloodline's ultimate purpose was revealed in a document that should never have survived. A family journal written in a mixture of English, Latin, and symbols that no linguistic expert has been able to fully decode. The journal, apparently passed down through generations of Halbrook patriarchs, was discovered in Caleb Halbrook's personal effects after his death in a suspicious fire that consumed the entire Sourwood Hollow compound in 1964. The final entries, written in Caleb's increasingly erratic handwriting, revealed the horrifying goal that had driven 6 generations of anatomical experimentation. The bloodline converges as prophesied. Each generation brings us closer to the perfect fusion, not just of bodies, but of consciousness itself. The twins are the culmination of our work, the vessel through which the family will achieve true unity. The central figure is not a flaw, but the key. It serves as the anchor point where all Halbrook souls will gather. According to the journal, every deformed child born to the Halbrook family had been part of a deliberate breeding program designed to create a single compound consciousness that could house the spirits of all deceased family members. The conjoined twins weren't a medical anomaly, but the successful result of over a century of genetic manipulation, guided by forces the journal described as the teachers who dwell in the deep places of the earth. Dr. Morse's final case notes, written just days before the entire Halbrook research project was officially terminated, documented changes in the twins that confirmed the journal's claims. The central figure has begun to display facial features of deceased Halbrook family members. Yesterday it bore the appearance of the original patriarch Jeremiah. Today it resembles the preacher Augustus Mills, though he died over a century ago. The conscious twins have become increasingly listless. as if their individual personalities are being absorbed into the collective consciousness housed in the central body. The last entry in Dr. Morse's hidden files was dated October 13, 1963. I understand now why previous physicians fled rather than continue their studies. The Halbrook bloodline was never producing medical abnormalities. They were creating vessels for something that should not exist in our world. Tonight, I observed the central figure speaking in the voice of Dr. Blackwood, reciting medical observations from the 1890s. It knows things it could never have learned. It remembers events that occurred before it was born. God help us all. We haven't been studying conjoined twins. We've been midwives to the resurrection of an entire family tree. On October 15, 1963, the Halbrook Twins and their connecting sibling vanished from the Louisville Research Facility. Official records indicate they died of complications related to their condition, but no death certificates were ever filed, no funeral arrangements were made, and no bodies were ever buried. Dr. Morse submitted his resignation the same day and left Kentucky, never to be seen again. The State Medical Board moved swiftly to suppress all evidence of the case. Every staff member who had contact with the twins signed comprehensive non-disclosure agreements backed by criminal penalties. The hospital's entire obstetrics wing was renovated, with the delivery room where the twins were born being sealed with concrete and officially reclassified as storage space. But suppression of evidence doesn't eliminate truth. It only drives it underground. Dr. Whitfield's secret documentation revealed that the twins had been transferred not to a morgue, but to a private facility in the remote mountains of eastern Kentucky, a location whose coordinates were encoded in a numerical cipher that took decades to crack. In 1987, a team of investigative journalists attempted to locate this facility using Dr. Whitfield's hidden clues. They found the remains of a concrete bunker built into a hillside, its interior laboratories long abandoned but still containing equipment designed for purposes no medical textbook described. The walls were covered with photographs documenting the twins' development, images that showed the central figure growing not older but more defined, its features cycling through the faces of dozens of different individuals. The most disturbing discovery was a series of video recordings dated months after the twins' supposed deaths. The footage showed the three-part being, now nearly 2 years old, contained in a specialized chamber filled with an amber fluid that seemed to pulse with its own internal light. The conscious twins floated in perfect stillness, while the central figure moved constantly, its mouth forming words in languages that predated human speech. The final frame of the last recording showed something that caused 3 of the 4 journalists to suffer complete psychological breakdowns. The central figure had turned to face the camera directly, and its eyes held not the vacant stare of a brain-dead infant, but the accumulated intelligence of an entire bloodline. When it spoke, its voice carried the overlapping tones of dozens of different speakers. We are eternal. We are legion. We remember everything. The journalists' investigation ended abruptly when their lead researcher, Margaret Chen, disappeared during a final expedition to the abandoned facility. Her notes, found scattered along a mountain trail, contained a discovery that explained why the Halbrook case had been so thoroughly suppressed. Similar children were still being born. Her research had uncovered birth records from across rural Kentucky, Tennessee, and West Virginia, documenting dozens of anatomically impossible births over the past 6 decades. All shared common characteristics: parents with surnames that appeared nowhere in genealogical records, births that occurred far from medical facilities, and infants who vanished from official documentation within weeks of delivery. Most disturbing were the census anomalies Chen had identified. Entire families appearing in remote mountain communities with no history of immigration or previous residence. When investigators attempted to visit these locations, they found abandoned homesteads containing evidence of recent habitation, but no trace of current residents. The houses themselves had been modified in ways that defied architectural logic: rooms with no doors, hallways that led nowhere, basements that extended far deeper than structural engineering would allow. In one such abandoned house, Chen's final notes documented the discovery of a nursery containing dozens of cribs arranged in ritualistic patterns. Each crib contained items that appeared to be personal effects of deceased children, clothing that showed signs of impossible alterations, toys designed for anatomical configurations that shouldn't exist, and photographs showing families whose members displayed the characteristic Halbrook abnormalities. The implications of Chen's research were clear. The Halbrook bloodline hadn't ended with the destruction of their compound in 1964. It had spread, adapted, and continued its work of creating biological vessels for collective consciousness. The original twins had been not the culmination, but the prototype for a breeding program that continued to operate in the hidden corners of Appalachian society. Despite decades of official denial and systematic evidence destruction, a handful of witnesses says to the Halbrook legacy remain alive, hidden in nursing homes and psychiatric facilities across Kentucky. Their testimonies, dismissed by authorities as senile delusions, paint a consistent picture of ongoing supernatural activity in the regions where the bloodline once flourished. Eleanor Cassidy, the nurse who witnessed the twins' birth, spent her final years in a state-run mental health facility, diagnosed with early-onset dementia that her family insisted was medically impossible given her previous mental acuity. Her medical records, obtained through a Freedom of Information Act request filed by paranormal researchers, document her consistent claims about visiting the triple children in her dreams. According to facility staff interviews, Eleanor would wake nightly in a state of extreme agitation, claiming that the Halbrook twins were calling to her through dimensions of space that human minds couldn't properly perceive. Her descriptions were remarkably detailed for someone supposedly suffering from cognitive decline. They've grown so large now, the conscious ones. But the middle child has become something else entirely. It houses thousands of voices, thousands of memories. They speak to me in the language of the blood, telling me about the others who have joined them since 1963. Similar accounts came from other surviving witnesses. A maintenance worker who helped clean the original research facility reported recurring nightmares about discovering additional chambers beneath the building's foundation, chambers containing tanks filled with amber fluid and shadowy forms that moved with purposeful intelligence. His psychiatric evaluations noted that he could provide architectural details about areas of the building that were supposedly never constructed, details that later proved accurate when renovation work uncovered hidden sub-basements. Most compelling was the testimony of Dr. Morse's own granddaughter, Rebecca, who claimed that her grandfather had continued his research in secret until his death in 1989. Among his personal effects, she found detailed anatomical drawings of creatures that appeared to be evolutions of the original Halbro. OK configuration. Beings with multiple consciousness centers connected by increasingly complex neural networks. His final notes, written in the distinctive handwriting that deteriorated as the Halbrook case progressed, contained coordinates for 17 different locations across the southeastern United States where similar births had allegedly occurred. Modern analysis of the surviving Halbrook documentation has revealed a pattern that extends far beyond Kentucky's mountain hollows. Genealogical research conducted by independent investigators has traced similar bloodlines to isolated communities throughout the Appalachian region, each following the same trajectory of increasingly impossible births followed by systematic evidence suppression. The pattern typically begins with the arrival of a family group in a remote location, often purchasing land at prices far below market value due to local superstitions or geological problems. Within a generation, the birth records begin showing anatomical abnormalities that medical professionals struggle to classify. Local physicians either flee the area or sign restrictive confidentiality agreements with state medical boards. The affected families then retreat into increasingly isolated compounds where outside observers are not welcome. What makes the pattern particularly disturbing is its consistency across different time periods and geographic locations. The same progression of events has been documented in the North Georgia mountains, the remote valleys of West Virginia, the isolated ridges of eastern Tennessee, and the deep hollows of Virginia's Blue Ridge. Each location shows evidence of families pursuing the same goal: the creation of compound beings capable of housing collective consciousness. Recent satellite imagery analysis has identified over 40 such compounds currently operating throughout the southeastern United States. The settlements share distinctive characteristics. Buildings constructed in non-standard configurations, extensive underground tunnel systems, and agricultural patterns that suggest the cultivation of plant species not native to their regions. Most telling are the thermal imaging signatures that show underground chambers maintaining temperatures inconsistent with natural cave systems. Government response to these discoveries has followed the same pattern established with the original Halbrook case: swift suppression, classification of evidence, and reassignment or early retirement of investigating personnel. The few researchers who have attempted to study the phenomenon systematically have found their funding cut, their credentials questioned, and their access to relevant archives restricted. The maintenance worker who discovered Dr. Morse's hidden files never spoke publicly about what he found in that hospital basement. Carl Hendricks sold the documents to a private collector and used the money to move his family to Oregon, where he spent the remainder of his life working in occupations that kept him far from medical facilities. When asked by friends why he had left Kentucky so suddenly, he would only say that some knowledge was too dangerous to carry. The collector who purchased the files, Dr. Amanda Sterling of the University of Virginia, attempted to verify the documentation through official channels, but found that every relevant record had been sealed or destroyed. Her attempts to contact surviving witnesses were met with legal threats from sources she could never identify. Eventually, she donated the files to a private archive specializing in suppressed medical history, where they remain accessible only to researchers with specific security clearances. But the true legacy of the Halbrook bloodline isn't contained in hidden files or classified documents. It lives in the isolated compounds scattered throughout Appalachian communities, where the work of creating collective consciousness continues under cover of rural isolation and governmental indifference. The original twins, now over 60 years old if they still live, have served their purpose as the prototype for something far more ambitious than medical science has ever imagined. In the deep places where mountain families gather to honor bloodlines older than memory, where children are born not for their individual potential, but for their capacity to serve as vessels for ancestral consciousness, the Halbrook legacy endures. They whisper of the day when the barriers between individual minds will dissolve entirely, when the accumulated knowledge and experience of entire family trees will merge into singular beings of impossible complexity. And somewhere in the Kentucky mountains, in chambers carved from living rock and filled with amber fluid that pulses with its own internal rhythm, the descendants of that first impossible birth continue their patient work of reshaping human consciousness itself. The doctors who tried to erase their existence succeeded only in driving them deeper underground, where they grow stronger with each passing generation, preparing for a reunion that will challenge everything we understand about the boundaries between life and death, individual and collective, human, and something far more profound. The case files may be buried, but the bloodline remembers everything.